I'm Jack Berryman, ACSM historian, and we're here in Las Vegas talking with Carol Torgan this morning, part of our ACSM's Distinguished Leaders in Sports Medicine and Exercise Science series. So welcome, Carol.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you for taking the time to chat with us. So we just wanted to start a little bit with your early career. High school, college, did you play sports? Where did you grow up? What did you major in college? That type of thing.
So I grew up in Denver, in a neighborhood full of lots of kids my age running around and playing all the time and being physically active. And I actually wanted to be a medical illustrator originally.
So you could draw.
I couldn't draw.
You couldn't draw.
That was the whole point.
That's a problem.
Is I couldn't draw. So I went to off to college at the University of Washington in Seattle, and originally was pre-med, and went through all the chemistry and biology, but wasn't so sure about it, and started taking kinesiology classes and just fell instantly in love with it. You know, my grades shot up. I loved studying. So I got done with my undergraduate degree in kinesiology, and then I thought, wow, this is great. I really want to learn more. So I pursued a master's degree at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and did my thesis with Bill Burns and Priscilla Clarkson, and then took some time off and thought about it and thought, you know, I love this. I want to know even more. I'm going on for a Ph.D.
Wow, okay.
So then I went to the University of Texas in Austin and did my dissertation under John Ivey and trained with Eddie Coyle and Jack Wilmore and the whole
Great
crew
group there.
Yeah, really
and,
great.
and at Amherst too, gee,
Yeah.
with Priscilla.
Right, with Priscilla, and I had a research assistantship with Patty Friedson. And actually, when I was at University of Massachusetts, that was my first ever ACSM regional chapter meeting.
Okay, and what
so that was the
time
first
period was
time.
that, Carol?
Do I really have to say?
Yes,
Yeah.
because I want to go back to Washington in a minute because I forget too.
Yeah, so that was probably around mid-'80s.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So you
So that
went
was
to
my
the New
first-
England chapter.
Right, the New England chapter was my very first
Did you present
exposure.
something when you were there, or?
You know, I honestly can't remember. I don't think so, but I honestly can't remember.
Of course, I'm biased, but the kinesiology program at the University of Washington was a pretty good program.
Yeah.
You were there at a good time.
And that's when we first met, and there
Yeah.
was a great program, and I think that was a really good foundation because in addition to the kinesiology classes and the biology, we had sports history and psychology and sociology.
Yeah.
So you really got the big picture appreciation of the
And
whole
what
field.
year did you leave there? I don't remember.
82 was
82.
when I graduated.
I told Ryan it was
Yeah.
late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure
82.
exactly when it was.
Right.
And what did you do your thesis in then at
It was on
UMass?
muscle soreness. It's delayed onset muscle soreness. Right. And so then, from Texas, I went and postdoced at Duke University Medical Center
Wow, I forgot about
in
that.
the Department of Medicine Division of Cardiology. So the whole time, I went from working with humans and muscle soreness to Texas. It was animal studies and
Okay.
glucose metabolism, glucose transport. And then at Duke, I was getting cellular. And then
So-
from Duke, I became assistant research professor, and then really much more cellular. And then I went on to the National Institutes of Health, to the Heart, Lung, Blood Institute as a senior staff fellow, pursuing even more, really going inside the muscle cell to see what was going on.
And what
there.
year was that, Carol?
Boy, let me think. I graduated from Texas in '92, so NIH must have been about '98.
Okay. So then you were at Duke 4 years, something?
5 years?
Yeah,
6,
it would have
yeah.
been 5, to add up, yeah.
So, and then at NIH doing more muscle nerve co-culture, but again more cellular, and then I became more molecular and more specialized, and the knowledge in the field was growing so much to really become good. It was like you were knowing more and more about less and less. You had to become so specialized.
So specialized,
Yeah.
so in depth. So
And in the meantime, I'd be reading news articles or magazine articles about fitness and health, and I'd think, well, they covered it wrong, and I could have, I could have explained this much better.
Yeah.
And I thought, and then I started writing fitness and health columns for the local bike club, just as a volunteer.
No, this is when you're at NIH.
Yeah, when I was at NIH,
And you're living in D.C., Bethesda,
yeah, Bethesda,
around there.
exactly.
Yeah, okay. So, and all along, after your New England meeting, did you, then when you went to Texas, did you get involved in the Texas chapter?
Right, and there's a very good, very strong Texas
They're
regional
big.
chapter.
Yeah, they've adopted me, so.
Yeah, that's a good chapter to be adopted
Yeah,
by.
they're great, yeah.
And I think that's started going to those meetings, presenting at those, really being involved in that, started going to the national meetings.
Do you remember when you went to your first national? Was it when you were at Texas, do you think, or at UMass?
I don't know if it was UMass or Texas. Probably
right around
Texas.
there, I'm sure.
Because what I remember is running around between all the different sessions, seeing your friends, running around like crazy and getting very little sleep.
Yeah.
That's what I tend to remember about those early those meetings as as a student.
And you presented at national meetings too.
Yeah, and you'd present, and then you would always dread. You'd give those abstracts poster sessions, and there was always some expert that you knew ahead of time who they were in your
and
session.
here they come walking down.
That's
looking
exactly.
at
They come
your
up
poster.
they come up to the mic in a presentation.
Yeah, okay.
And they say, "That's a very outstanding presentation." However, and then you knew the killer question was about to come, and you'd just be sweating.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I remember when you were at Texas, you were really doing some great stuff, all at the right time. I mean, that's why you ended up at Duke and NIH, and you were really on the cutting edge of so many things.
Right, it's right. All the molecular biology was taking off, but when you have physiology as a foundation, you have the context to understand the relevance of it.
And that's where I want to go next, because I know sort of what you're doing now and your interests, and I just find that so amazing that you're one of the few people, I think, that have really gone from the molecular level back here again.
Right.
Sort of the big picture. Yeah. And so tell me a little bit about how that happened. You were writing for the bicycle club, and that's where your interest started to shift, I'm sure.
Right. So, in the intramural labs at NIH, and I was in the laboratory of biochemical genetics, whose the laboratory chief was Marshall Nirenberg, who has the Nobel for cracking the genetic code. The codon is thanks to him. So it's great having a journal club where you're presenting to a Nobel laureate. That's always fun.
Yeah.
But compared to my Texas days, it was like easy compared to these meetings. It was, it was an easy crowd.
Yeah.
But the more I got into the cell, the more I thought, this is so interesting. It really needs to be translated out to a wider audience.
What does this mean?
And made relevant. And so while I was at NIH, you can do these details, which are like internships. And so I was able to do a detail within the Heart Lung Blood Institute in the Office of Communications.
Okay.
So work with the communications folks that write press releases, handle press queries, work on the educational campaigns. So I would be in their office in the morning, and then in the lab in the afternoon.
At the bench, one.
And of course, you don't have 2 part-time jobs. It really ends up being 2 full-time.
Yeah.
So I did a rotation there for 3 months, and then I did another rotation in the NIH Office of the Director, in the Office of Communications and Online Information. And so from there, I decided that I would leave the lab bench, which was a very big decision.
That's
when
huge.
you've pretty much kind of tailored your whole career to be this tenure track
and
university
probably
professor.
no job in hand either.
No.
Right?
And I had connections, so I did end up with a position as a contractor back to NIH in communications in several of the institutes, working on web content. Because at that time, then the web's really taking off, and all the information is online, and you're learning how to write information tailored for the web. And so when I was there doing that work, I actually got recruited to go to a big health startup, which was Revolution Health, which was co-founded, well, it was founded by Steve Case, who was co-founder of AOL.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So he had this big health site called Revolution Health. So I went there as senior content director.
So this is still in the D.C. area?
Yeah, so this is all in the D.C. area. So this was, you know, it's a 180 to go from a government nonprofit to a huge for-profit startup.
Wow.
But then you really learn the whole online, it's when Health 2.0 and forums and online communities, and we're all going to start blogging. And so that got me into that world.
I wondered, because that's obviously a big change.
Yeah.
Before we move on to all that, were there people that tried to talk you out of making that big jump? Because you were really good at what you did.
Yeah.
You know, people at NIH, for instance, saying, "Why would you want to do that?
You know,
don't you want to stay here?"
Yeah, you're constantly weighing. I mean, that was a huge unknown. That was a huge jump.
Yeah.
And you just, you know, I think you have these opportunities to sort of reinvent yourself, or to do something different, or to take your skill set and your knowledge and apply it in a different way. And I tend to say I'll go for it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was huge. I mean, I tell people I'm in, all of a sudden you're working with developers and usability experts and business development people, and as scientists, we're trained to think a very certain way. We tend to interact with people that think and process information the same way we do. You know, and it's a big learning curve. I mean, I found as scientists we're trained to think very skeptically. To a fault, and you go into these meetings and you tend to want to pick things apart, and it doesn't go over that well.
And I would think, as a scientist, you want to have a controlled atmosphere, you know, and you're going now to like, whoa.
Right. Yeah.
It's the world out here. You know?
Right. It really is.
So that's a big change too.
Yeah.
Huge.
And the big, you know, this for-profit, I mean, I joked because I was in a meeting and they said, well, something about SEM. And I thought, why are people talking about scanning electron microscopes? And it was search engine marketing. You know, it was completely different realm.
Right
it
there.
is, and it's like, wow,
That's
different
a good
world.
example, Carol.
So,
Well, so tell me a little bit now about what you're doing now.
Okay.
And so you're not with the health group anymore. You sort of
so,
started your own thing now,
So
right?
Revolution, I was with them from near the very beginning to when they merged a couple of years ago with Everyday Health. And then that was sort of when the, you know, recession hit, and found myself looking for something to do. And I thought, well, I have this science expertise. I have this web, new media, Health 2.0 expertise, so I'll start consulting and see. So, you know, and that's one thing as scientists, is we aren't really trained in the business side of things.
Right.
So it's another, again, yet another steep learning curve.
Right. How can I make money at this too?
Yeah, how can I get paid to do what I love? So I am, you know, right now, I do consult like for some groups at NIH on an hourly contractor basis, where I'm again helping write health content out, disseminate it out for the public. I've written health content for the National Wildlife Federation. I'm working on white papers. I maintain a blog. I'm consulting with some entrepreneur technologists, because my physiology background has positioned me really well to advise more engineering developers on technologies for health. So I'm here at the meeting talking about this hot new trend of self-tracking, because I understand it from a physiologist perspective, but then I see the other sides of the technology and implications, as well as the science behind it.
Yeah. Wow. So I think you probably stayed associated with ACSM the whole time.
Right, that's exactly right.
UMass till now.
Yeah.
And when did you start getting involved with the summits?
You know, it was
and
almost...
And how? Because you're really contributing more, whatever you want to call it, the media side or whatever. I mean, you're clearly not doing your cellular
Right.
stuff.
Right, and you're
So-
exactly right, because I used to be, I've always gone to the annual meeting for, really, really long time.
Yeah, right.
Let's say decades. But, and at one point, I was chair of the Molecular and Cellular Regulatory Mechanisms
Wow.
Interest Group. And then, here I am speaking at the summit, and I think
Yeah.
probably, I want to say around 2002 or 3, I think I had colleagues that were on the program committee or had spoken at it before and suggested I look into it.
Mhm.
And I thought, this is perfect, because I'm all about translating the science out.
Mhm.
And here's an audience that
Yeah.
represents where the rubber meets the road. So
Yeah,
this
which
is
is-
the perfect audience.
That was sort of, if I remember correctly, why they started
Yeah.
these in the first place, was how do we get the research out
Right.
to the people that are
Yeah.
using it.
Yeah.
And so you just fit in that perfectly.
Right. That's exactly right.
Well, I'm trying to remember what summit it was, maybe Austin, but I remember you did talks on Twitter and and,
On
you know,
using social media.
yeah.
Yeah.
And now what's your blog on? Is it the play
So
thing?
I cover, so I have a blog, and I'm really at the intersection of health and science and technology. So it's a real wide range of topics. It can be
Oh,
some
okay.
of the new media, it can be some basic physiology, but how it applies. Some of this technology, self-tracking, devices, So it's a real, kind of the intersection of all of that.
And I'm sort of ignorant about blogs, so you just write something when you feel like it?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. And how do people find out about blogs, and do you have a group of followers and that type of thing?
Yeah, so a lot of this, and it's good because it's about spreading word of mouth, and nowadays it's Twitter and Facebook, and it's the use of social media and sharing it with people who then share it with their friends. It goes back to the search engine use of people searching on information and just having, you have to actually learn how to choose the best words to put into your post so that people
can find it. Yeah, okay. And it's communications.
And it's communication,
Um,
right.
I think that's the most difficult thing for my students today to understand about history, is that they assume that you knew it today, someone knew it tomorrow,
Right.
or even today. And you explain, no, we only had books or
Oh, right.
journals.
Yeah.
There were no telephones, there were no it's like it took 12 years for the people in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins to realize what was going on in London.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But today it's pretty much instant.
Yeah, it is.
So if someone then were to Google certain key words, they would find your blog.
Right.
Okay.
They'd find a post, sure.
Yeah, okay,
Right.
all right.
Right, and these are skills, and a good example is because now with ACSM, I'm on the Communications and Public Information Committee, so working to select the best studies within MSSE to showcase with press
perfect.
releases, and then looking at the information that's on the website. How can we use sort of this search engine optimization to elevate the information to make it easier for people to find ACSM's information.
So our conversation yesterday, impromptu, was timely
Right,
for
that's
what you're
exactly
trying
right.
to do.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because these interviews we would like to make more available to
Right.
people, and that
Yeah.
on the website would probably be one of the
right.
best ways to do it.
Mhm.
So tell me a little bit more about what you're presenting here and the audience and their interest. I would think the interest is high.
Yeah, so my talk is on the new trend of self-tracking, where, share, compare. And it's looking at all the gadgets that people are using now to track. And, you know, we know them in our lab days as the heart rate monitors and the pedometers,
I see.
but now they're getting extremely sophisticated. And they're becoming much more mainstream. And there's communities built up around them. So, for example, Nike has a new wristband that you can track. You know, it's using certain technologies, and then they have an online community where people can share what they're doing.
So when you're saying tracking, you don't mean GPS tracking. You mean monitoring heart rate,
Right.
or how far you've walked, or
You know,
what?
all of the above. I mean, that's
Okay.
what's so interesting, is because you can track physiological measures, yeah, like your movement or steps or how fast you're moving. But there's also now, I mean, you think about your cell phones and all the technology available, the GPS, like where you are. And when
Why
you're
do
there.
people want to know where they are?
Well, an example that I gave is there's a tracking device these guys have developed, and it's a GPS that fits on top of asthma inhalers. And so anytime somebody uses their asthma inhaler,
Good
it
idea.
tracks when and where they used it. And so they can look at the individual level to see if there are patterns of, you know, this time of day they always use it, or when they're in this location next to X factory or something, they're always using it. But then it can become part of a community where you look at these trends.
Oh, then you're comparing.
And then you can start
data,
seeing
yeah.
environmentally, in this part of this city, there's wide use of asthma inhalers, or at this time of day. And so your data becomes much more powerful when it's shared.
Is there any kind of a safety component?
Right.
I mean,
There's
if
obviously.
we know where this person is.
Right.
They've just passed out or whatever.
Right.
So
You know, there's safety issues, there's big privacy issues with this.
yes.
Of
yeah.
course, with a lot of this, where people, this location-based, you know, for all of us who are sitting here and tweeting and saying, I'm at this meeting in Las Vegas, we're indirectly saying, I'm not in my home right now this week.
I've been reading about that,
Yeah.
that people are looking at obituary columns and
Yeah.
realizing that this was
Right.
somebody's mother and they're not going to be here today,
Yeah.
so we'll go clean out their house while they're
Right.
gone. Yeah, that would be there's a whole ethical dilemma, there's a whole, to that. Anyhow, we're almost out of time already. I told you it went fast. So, do you have any thoughts about ACSM itself? You've been around it a long time.
Right.
And I always like to ask people that have been in a long time how you think it's going. You know, or is the college still doing the right things? Are they still sort of the gold standard in the industry? And do you have any thoughts on?
You know, I think, I mean, for me, obviously, I'm the perfect example of having changed career paths. Just because I've changed, I have always fit within ACSM. And it's that old
That's a
philosophy
good
you
point.
hear time and time again, is that the strength is the diversity
Yes.
of the broadness of it. That you have basic science as well as the allied and the outreach. And it is spanning the full range.
Yeah, good point.
You know, and I would like to see, you know, it's interesting to me because I go to the annual meeting and I go to the summit, and I think there's very few of us that go to both.
I agree.
And
I
while
you're
I
right.
see some of the scientists here presenting to outreach the science, you know, I would like to see more of the allied health professionals showcase and help make the scientists aware of the relevance of their work,
Yeah.
or how it can be relevant.
Good
And I'd
point.
also like to see, I mean, at the summit you have all these workouts early in the morning and at noon in the evening that
Yeah.
everybody just loves.
Yes, yes.
And I'd like to see that aspect come to the
At
annual
the
meeting
annual
as
meeting,
well. So we
right.
practice what we preach there
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
a good point.
Yeah.
Those are good ideas. It would be interesting
Yeah.
to see how many turn out at the annual meeting for the Zumba.
I think you'd need a larger room, is what I think.
Well, anyhow,
So-
Carol, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This has been fun.